Forgotten Legions, Two Battles of the Eastern African Campaign, 1941, published by Compass Game and part of the designer's signature edition. This is basically two games in one, two independent standalone games that rely on the same set of core rules, plus some other rules for specific events and other crown, but that means that you get to play two games after really learning only one set of rules, which is great. The games are Drive on Damascus and Bloody Keren. In Drive on Damascus, you're gonna have Allied forces trying to take control of Damascus and Beirut against forces from the Vichy, France, and in Bloody Keren is gonna be the Allies against the Italians that are holding the area surrounding Asmara in Eritrea. So the game comes with separate maps for the different games, and those are large maps. Each map is actually made of two paper maps. The largest map is the one for Drive on Damascus, and you see it here. Again, as I said, it's basically different maps next to each other, as you can see. The Allies are going to start with a group in this area, plus other units scattered in this other area, but mainly it's the reinforcements that are going to be important here. And the forces of Vichy France are going to control Damascus, Beirut, and they have a number of other scattered units here and there. Some of those units are untried, which means that you don't know their combat value until you see how well they fight, so that's always fun. But general idea is this, and in both scenarios have the strong defender versus attacker dichotomy. In both scenarios are going to be about the attacker trying to take control of key locations on the board. That is what victory is based on, simply controlling locations. And the defender is going to try to slow down the enemy advance, to wake up garrisons. In both games, a lot of units of the defender are under a garrison marker, and you can remove one such marker every turn. In this game, you also have reserves that become active on turn 4. And so here the defender is trying again to wake up everybody, to exploit the terrain. There's more than you expect. Terrain to set up a good defense, and also possibly threaten supply lines. Supply is important because it will weaken the attacker. And this is interesting because you have large maps, which means large fronts, which means a burden on the attacker side to protect supply lines, because it wouldn't be that hard to drive there just as a massive single attack towards Damascus and Beirut, but then your supply lines are threatened by these annoying guys that keep coming up from here. So interesting situation here. Basically you have a three-pronged situation, because of course you have almost like a tunnel between the mountains and the sea that leads to Beirut. You have the open space in front of Damascus, and here you have this other corridor between the mountains that will then allow you possibly to divert forces towards Beirut or Damascus. If you start going in the mountains, then you're never going to get to the other side, simply because of how slow movement there is. As for Bloody Keren, here we have the Italians controlling this area of Eritrea, Asmara, which is their most prized possession, their colonial jewel. They're really protective of it. But guess what? The Allies don't care. The Allies will come with from a strong group here, from other units that come from there, and then you have units of the Italian defenders scattered pretty much all over the place. Again, you have garrisons that will wake up from time to time. You also have irregular units that will pop out at specific locations throughout the game. Once eliminated, they may come back later. Again, we have untried units. So this is pretty much to give you a sense of the general geography of the game, but also how that affects overall gameplay. Again, that map also is about tunnels and corridors in the mountains, which give an advantage to the defender who's trying to create bottlenecks, because otherwise, well, it's hard to survive, it's hard to make it. Now, as for the game pieces that we have here, the units, we have military units represented by these counters, and the factors that you see printed on them are bottom left is attack, then we have defense, and then we have movement. And different kind of colors in the background indicate different types of movements that will affect things. Artillery has a small value printed there in the top left corner. That is the range at which artillery can lend support. And just to put some markers here and there randomly on the board, because doesn't it look nice? Yes, they do. They do look nice. So, you have a couple of little things about Chrome, again, that will add some rules, so you have to remember how certain units work, the kind of advantages that Alpine units give you, and so on and so forth. But in truth, when you look at what happens around all those little Chrome bits, the game is as simple as has move, and one side moves and attacks, and the other side moves and attack. Really that simple, that basic. This is definitely a game that could be an intro war game in case you never played war games before. Each scenario, or so each game really, has its own set of counters, with the exception of a small group of counters that need to be used in both, and that slows down setup a little bit because you have to separate them every time. It would be a lot easier, of course, and faster if you could just keep the counters for the two sides separate. How about untried units? Because those are always so much fun. I cannot find any, but I showed you earlier. You also have a fleet that, of course, should not be here in the middle of the desert. It's gonna stay up there and move around the coast, performing different missions, doing different things. You also have counters for air power, which also can be used for different things, such as combat support. And there's a procedure that tells you whether or not those air and naval supports do anything. Basically, there's a list of possible missions they can perform, but there are modifiers you need to take into account. You roll a die, take those modifiers into account, and then you'll know if the naval or air unit that you're trying to use for support will arrive or not. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. So, as for the flow of the game, again, very simple. One player will activate and move any and all of their units up to the full movement allowance. After that, that player may declare attacks. Interesting, attacking is not mandatory, but if you do activate a unit for combat, then that unit has to attack all of the adjacent enemies that have not been attacked by other enemies. Once you declare your attack, then you calculate combat odds by dividing the total attack factors of the attacker by the total defense of the defender. Apply modifiers to the die roll, take into account the terrain that also will have combat effects. And once you have a column, the column for the ratio, describing the ratio between the attack of the attacker and the defense of the defender, cross-reference with a modified die roll, and then you will see what happens. Results with a D applied to the defender, of course, with an A applied to the attacker, and these can be step losses, these can be retreats, which you simply, well, perform. Again, very simple, very old school. You need to take into account supplies that we need to draw. You need to be able to draw supply lines to roads, which then in turn will reach edges of the board that act as supplies. Again, you have a lot of little things to do with air support and naval support, untried units, garrison reserves. But in essence, if you're a new wargamer, don't be overwhelmed. It is move and attack, then the other side moves and attack with a little bit of Chrome around it. And this is in essence how you play Forgotten Legions. So Forgotten Legions is a really good set of two games, so good value for your money and good value for your time. As I grow older and grumpier, my love for war games is undiminished. My impatience with rule books decreases fast. The idea that I can read 1.5 rule books to get 2 games, really good. Really good deal. And I just like the old school. What can I say? Even before I became this old and this grumpy, I like move and attack and some other ornaments from there, some other elements that give me the sense. So I figure out if this is the North African campaign, East African campaign, the 30 Years War, or Caesar in Gaul. That I know I want that historical detail. But again, I'm becoming increasingly impatient for rule books that give me a lot of that. Forgotten Legions strikes just the right balance there between simplicity and historical detail, between playability, easy access, and still historical flavor. Because you have two different campaigns that feel different enough from one another. They do have a family resemblance. In both cases, again, a strong dichotomy between attacker and defender. The defender being at a disadvantage as a lot of their units are not available at the beginning. They have to scramble to get them in position. The attacker that may have an overall advantage but also has a lot of work to do, has to deal with protecting supply lines. In both cases, in fronts that are very large, and you do not have a large number of units, so you may find yourself diverting units just to go and eliminate those few annoying people on the flanks threatening supply lines. The defender, the attacker, will get weakened overall and slowed down as you're getting closer to the target. So in both cases, you have an overall general architecture, but you also have enough differences, enough unique rules to give different flavor, but not to the point that it becomes overwhelming, and just the different maps and the different composition of the counter pools, the different kind of counters that you have with different strengths and weaknesses, they do result in 2 different experiences. So that's really great. You truly have 2 different games with 1 rule set and a couple of extra things. And another important thing, again, both games are good. They're really good. They're fun, they're exciting, precisely because of the fact that both sides have a lot of things to worry about, have pluses and minuses, have advantages and tasks that they have to accomplish. So I really had a really good time playing both. I couldn't tell which one I like more. Maybe a little bit the Damascus thing. Just I really like the 3-prong approach, and especially with the central tunnel that you can use then to try to threaten one of the other 2 areas. But the Bloody Keren scenario or game actually is also very good. So fun. Forgotten Legions is a great value for your money and for your time. 2 solid games. Topics coming from World War II, but not as universally represented in gaming as so many other ones. So that is also nice and refreshing to play a game about a war that you know very well, that you have an interest, but maybe you don't have gamed these specific topics all that much. Forgotten Legions, Drive on Damascus and Bloody Keren, really strong package.